Sexual harassment in universities and workplaces is a widespread issue that goes unreported. Many victims feel powerless due to fear, stigma, or lack of trust in institutional systems. Today, we are tackling this critical issue, looking at what sexual harassment is, the challenges in reporting, and how institutions and organizations can do better in preventing and addressing it. My name is Tsepang, and this is the Gender Space with the Commission for Gender Equality. Stay tuned. Welcome to another informative episode of the Gender Space, brought to you by the Commission for Gender Equality. And today we are diving into an important conversation of sexual harassment in institutions of higher learning and the workplace. It is a serious issue affecting students and employees across different industries, and many people don't even realize when they've been harassed. As usual, we want to hear from you. So join the conversation online and share your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed or experienced sexual harassment at work or at school? How do you think institutions should handle these cases? Find out more about this on our platforms, on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn as the Commission for Gender Equality, and on X at CGE_ZA, as well as on Instagram at CGE Live. Before we go any further, let's take a look at this.
So my understanding regarding sexual harassment is that it's when a person maybe touches you without permission, without consent. That could be taken as sexual harassment when someone doesn't consent to you and they're trying to do something sexual to you.
Sexual harassment can be when someone has been sexually abused, or when someone has been made to do things sexually that they're against of and didn't give consent of.
Could be just me grabbing you or just kissing you without your consent. Yeah, basically that, such stuff.
Someone being overly sexual in their behavior towards someone that is not really for that.
Okay, my understanding of sexual harassment is when you're being touched inappropriately by the opposite sex. Well, nowadays it could be the same sex as well. Someone who is looking at you in a way that you don't feel comfortable and touching you in places that you don't feel comfortable.
I could be just all over you, touching you where you feel uncomfortable. That's harassment on its own.
Making sexual advances that aren't welcomed or appreciated by the other party.
From illicit calling of someone when people are at the club, I know especially when alcohol is infused, people passing sexual remarks where they objectify someone by their body type, whether it's male or female. And just those kind of things is what would, I think, constitutes as sexual harassment,
Interesting thoughts. To help us unpack today's topic, we are joined by Her Royal Highness Commissioner Morani, Khonzi, and Nomathemba. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Commissioner, Her Royal Majesty, I'm going to start with you. You know that South Africa, we have a lot of legal frameworks. I just want you to tell us what is the definition of sexual harassment in line with the law?
So in South Africa, according to our law, Tsepang, sexual harassment is defined as an unwanted or unwelcome, inappropriate conduct of either bullying or intimidation in relation to sexual advances that are being made. So it's not a persistent thing that occurs at times. I know that's normally the definition. However, it can happen once off, but it's something that definitely undermines an individual and has to do a lot more with sexual favors. So it's a tit for tat. What can you do for me? So benefits are promised, rewards are promised in return for those sexual favors.
Yes, I think maybe Lekaregia further on the explanation to say what are the types of sexual harassment.
All right. So kuhlukahlukene lama different forms noma types lakhona. There is the verbal or written, then we have the physical, and then we have visual. So just a quick example nakhona to give over. If you look at verbal, for example, definitely remarks that are made, sensual or sexual jokes nakhona. And written, we've got social media right now. We have instant messaging right now. So text messages are sent forth. That is also considered as part of those. We also have those that are physical that most people know or are aware of, where individuals do definitely touch, pet you in certain ways. And then lastly, the one that is a visual. So signals are sent, what you see is conveyed to you. So kubaluleke kakhulu ukuthi sathi ukuthi kuhlukahlukene akusinethi nje ukuthi umuntu akuthinze kuphela. Very important for us to note. Thank you.
Yes, and what is the impact of that on emotional and psychological well-being of victims?
It is so broad, because this starts off where victims start feeling as if though maybe they incited, they gave a certain overview to someone that, I want this, you can target me. So the key things that we need to know, especially when you're looking at the wellness, it's spirit, mind, and body. So it does break an individual. There is a lot of depression that comes up, anxiety. People feel, like I said, it's intimidation. So at times people have developed this fear of going either to their workplaces or even their learning institutions out of fear of, I will see this person, I will engage. So it develops a lot of fear and anxiety, definitely, and a lot of worry and concern. It does definitely lead to depression. Yes.
Thank you so much. Khonze, and we do know that in South Africa, we have a serious challenge of gender-based violence, and we need to understand sexual harassment within the context of GBV. Can you tell us the linkages to that, and what is the role, what does GBV play in terms of perpetuating sexual harassment?
Thank you so much, Stepang. I always like to simplify this because people banahana hore khonale boatlhogadi, or there's no relations between sexual harassment and violence. And I always say, in a simpler form, it has to start somewhere. And it's similar with sexual harassment. It's a build-up. So that's the interlinkage, just to make it simpler. Before you can do anything, it's like stealing. Yesterday I was listening to something very interesting. Before you steal 5 million, steal a mere toilet papers. Same as sexual harassment. What you do is usheba motofela, you just wink. It's uncomfortable. Before you can even reach to violating them. And in most cases, yes, it's linked. It's linked in such a way that one would want to understand why do we then attach gender into it. It's very much important that you attach gender into it, because of lately we'd even think that if a male, a heterosexual male, looks at another male, it's okay, winks at them, it's okay. It's not okay. That's where it starts, and then it breaks down into linking to gender-based violence.
Thank you so much. Nothemba, we hear a lot about sextortion, quid pro quo. Can you take us through the forms of sexual harassment?
All right, thank you, Sepang. Sexual harassment yehlukile according to the conduct le ingafunwayo ne. Sometimes in most cases ne, it in a vertical approach kuthiwa iqala kumuntu ophezulu onesikhundla esiphezulu iye kumuntu ozansi kuzisebenze. So umuntu ophezulu ngayi supervisor, engayi manager, engangumuntu osesikhundleni ozokwazi ukuthi ke ngoku affect i-employment processes, affect uba umuntu uyapromotwa, umuntu uyadismisswa, umuntu ufumana reward ethile, and then ke ngoku le quid pro quo harassment comes into play. Apho uzothi enza into ethile ndiza kupromota, enza into ethile ndiza kunantsika, ndiza kumove from a contract ndikunike into a permanent position. That's your quid pro quo harassment.
Thank you so much. Her Royal Majesty, what are the barriers for people to report? What barriers exist?
I believe the first one starts ngomuntu as an individual. Njengoba ngishilo ukuthi kuba nokusaba yena ukuthi akuthini uma ukuthi ngiyokhuluma nebantu, what will they think, but uthini, depending on who is there. Nakhona depending on, is it the workplace or the higher learning institutions, people have this fear of, what if I voice out and then they somehow go and engage with this person, even if it's not the direct supervisor itself. So kubalulekile ukuthi bantu bathi ukuthi the barriers that are in place are definitely ukuthi the higher power above me. What if by communicator born, the systems that are in place, can I truly trust them? So people don't have that confidence but it starts off with an individual as a person report. Yes.
So as a country, we have legal frameworks a lot, and we encourage people to report using these legal frameworks. Do they work?
Masbuga, our own research and our own engagements, because our stakeholder engagement in our different provinces, they do work. You know, the systems are there, they're in place. Once again, it comes back to an individual who fears what will happen if I go to a police station, what will happen if I go to, you know, this department or this HR individual, will they take me seriously? If I go to other organizations, will they take me seriously? So they are in place. The question is, are individuals able to, like, opportunity now?
Thank you so much. Khonzi, we know that the Commission has done a study on sexual harassment in higher education. Tell us, what can institutions do to create a safe learning environment?
Yeah, this is an easy one, but yet it's difficult. Firstly, a lot of people, there's so much unawareness around sexual harassment. People do not understand what is there before you can even, because if I would start by policies, but before you even engage on a policy, somebody needs to understand what is sexual harassment. So firstly, you go on university site, you look at the university site, you don't see anything, simplistic definition of what sexual harassment is. It should start there. Before a student can even begin to fill up an application form in an institution, atlatsa form in this institution. So let's say ubalaka sexual harassment, know about it and all that. That's the first departure before going anywhere.
Yes. Baburi Korae, know about the policy of your institution. Sexual harassment is often misunderstood, ignored, or minimized. But as we have seen, it can take many different forms. After the break, we talk about the processes institutions have in place in order to address it. Libueng Kapila. Welcome back. You are still watching The Gender Space, and today's topic is about understanding sexual harassment. Many institutions have policies against sexual harassment, but how many people actually know about them? Are they effective? Before we continue the conversation with our guests in studio, let's hear from students and professionals about whether they know where to report sexual harassment cases.
The organization that I work for, it does have in place reporting channels too for you to report sexual assault or sexual harassment. And there's a platform.
In the workplace, we have got processes and procedures to report it. We go to our HR and everything is confidential.
Last year we had a friend of ours that was being followed. She had a stalker, and then she was able to report at the school, and then they helped her. And the guy that did this whole thing, I think he got expelled.
Quite controversial views. Khonzi, we know that the Commission does a bit of analysis on policy. What should a sexual harassment policy entail?
Okay, I'll just briefly talk about how it should look like in terms of higher education. Firstly, institutions must recognize that we have students from different backgrounds, different languages and all that. And it should not be only pushed on making it too academic. A policy is not an academic document. Yes. Let's start there. It needs to read very fluently and easier. Firstly, definition. You cannot have a policy that does not clearly define. And what does clearly definition mean? Policy very clear in terms of explaining what verbal is. Policy it's quite clear on what touching is, what looking, what visual is. If it does not speak towards that, then it does not clearly define. Secondly, it must be gender sensitive. And kibia as it is, because sometimes it's hard to say prohibits same-sex issues, but same-sex does not include members of the LGBTQI+. Same-sex can be two heterosexuals abusing each other and all that. So it needs to be very clear and gender sensitive in terms of that. Then it needs to also give guidelines in terms of how to report, where to report, and why to report. So that in a synopsis, that's how it should look like.
Notemba, yes, come in.
If I can add from what Khonzi has mentioned, there is a 2022 code on the prevention and elimination of harassment, 2022. It's available on the Department of Labor website. Institutions can use that code as a framework because that code is very clear. Yes. In our definitions, inawo incazelo ukuthi mawenza lena uphinde wenze lena, then that constitutes sexual harassment. Additionally, iyacho ukuthi umuntu angareporta makutheni, the time periods or speculation as to whether they can report immediately or anytime they feel they're ready to report. So in imiqathango emininzi, ayikhavarishi only sexual harassment, it covers harassment in general.
In imiqathango emininzi. Nothemba, I'm still with you. So we find that institutions do have policies, but they've shelved them somewhere and no one knows. Are these policies well communicated?
In the investigations we have done as the Commission for Gender Equality in our hearings, we do request the institutions to provide us with copies of their policies. Indices one is that policies are outdated. Additionally, abayenzi training employees zabo. For instance, we request register if bayenzi training. We seeking about how often do they do as trainings, and we find that as trainings and employees azikho informed. Ibuyele kubo ke ngoku ichane bona njengoba bengayenzi training, it means create a safe space yabo apho ke ngoku kungazubakho le sexual harassment ngenxa yolonto ba akho training, akho dissemination of information, distribute even via email, abenzi awareness programs, so ziyaleka in that aspect.
Nothemba, I'm an employee or I'm a student and I've been harassed. I don't know anything about the policy. I have never seen. What do I do in those circumstances?
All right, ukungazi umthetho Tsepang ayo defense ayo into nokuthethelela. Xa kuvule icase of sexual harassment kuyajongwa lento uyenzileyo ne uba iya constitute na sexual harassment. Secondly, if akho police okanye ubungayazi, i-employer nayo is placing themselves at risk because they can be sued for vicarious liability for not creating a safe space in the employment. So they can be sued in terms of the Employee Act.
Yeah, just to add on what my learned friend has just spoke about, in cases where there's a student who does not know of a policy or knows that it does not exist, similar thing exists. It is the institution's mandate to make sure that they create a safe space for baithuti in higher institution of learning. What students do not know is that they can hold the universities liable for not creating that space, because guess what? When you go into disciplinary hearing, when you sit, the policies are thrown into you in that, and students, victims or survivors lose cases because they were not particularly aware of cases. And guess what? Perpetrators win cases for non-existence of that policy. I didn't know. So because I didn't know that it's wrong. So it is important that these things are carved in there. And also, some institutions, what we've learned is that they do not have policies, but they have guidelines. So an institution would have a university statute, and under that, it has elements of what you need to follow, so that should you find yourself only a victim or a survivor, you can go through that and win your case. That's simple. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Her Royal Majesty, I have been victimized in the workplace, and we do know that institutions are struggling with a trust deficit. Do I feel safe? Am I safe if I report a case in an institution? What mechanisms are put in place?
Kubalekile as ma employees bantu bathi ukuthi uma ukuthi you have that fear ukuthi labantu batotsini if I go and report to HR, what if it starts spreading? That fear of nakhona secondary victimization is definitely there. So kubalekile ukuthi bantu bathi ukuthi if you feel that internally within your own institution you feel that you're not covered and protected, there are other individuals that you can go out to and address, because at the end of the day, like we defined, harassment becomes a precursor to the assault. So kubalekile kakhulu ukuthi people note and understand that if it cannot happen internally, there are places you can go to, and the policies need to break down and say, listen, for such help, contact this number. For such information, contact this information. So it's things that need to be in place. They need to be set out, but they are there. The frameworks are there. It starts they will not stand up. So if someone knows where to go, if they feel like there's a blockage up, it helps out a lot. It's important, my colleagues have mentioned, they need to find what the root is. Yes. So if there's a blockage hence we have institutions like us.
Yes, thank you for that. Nothemba, just on what the commissioner is saying, if I'm harassed in the institution and I don't trust the mechanisms in place, can I go to CCMA to report? What is the role of CCMA in this?
Okay, kubalekile qala uthi exhaust internal remedies, yabo. So if ikhona ipolicy inemiqathango ba enza kanje, you have to follow ezo steps stipulated kulo policy. But ke ngoku if the internal remedies do not work for you, that is when ke ngoku uzoya ku CCMA utsho ba ndifakile complaint ngedate ethile ayahoyakala, ndifakile ndayilandela yonke imiqathango andahoyakala, so andina option ke ngoku ba mandize ku CCMA. So i-CCMA ingena up, awuqala uye straight ku CCMA ungayireportanga either at your workplace or your institutions, yabo. So funeka ube ne-proof, for example, xa uya ku CCMA, whether it's a complaint in writing ba ndiyile kubani bani ngedate ethile ndachaza ba ndiyahlukumezeka, akwenziwa nto okanye khange ndiyithande indlela ekwenziwe ngayo, yabo, okanye the process was flawed ngokuthi, which is why ndisiya e-CCMA. I-CCMA ingena apho.
Yes, and Nothemba, I'm coming back to you. We do know that reporting is a serious challenge. As a victim, we often fear to report. So in terms of your legal understanding, what are the obstacles that exist for victims to report?
Okay, enye ye-obstacles butwam kukubona ukuba akho consistency kulo msebenzi ngendlela eku-aplaya ngayo ipolicy, okanye ubona uba okay bekukhona le case emsebenzini, lo mntu one uye wa-victimizwa further, so i-affecta nabanye who are victims of sexual harassment uba baze phambili, nokungabikho miqathango icacileyo kuba okay xa ndihlukumezekile funeke ndenza kanje. So ke ngoku zezinto eziprevent uba abantu uba baze ngaphambili because abafilishi uba ipolicy zabaprotector, yabo. And sometimes ufumanisa uba nalo mntu kuthiwa uyakuhlukumezwa akasuspendwa, so ufuneka ubuye lapha emsebenzini. So ke ngoku zezinto abantu bayabona mos nezinye ii-victims ziyabona, not only low reportileyo, so bayababona uba noba ndingayichaza okanye ndize phambili icase yam ayizuhoyakala okanye andizuba protected.
Thank you so much. Baburi Korae, let's continue to report. Reporting sexual harassment can be complicated and even a daunting process. After the break, we unpack the power dynamics that make it difficult for victims to speak out. Leboheng ka pela. Sexual harassment is not just individual behavior. It's also about power. Power that allows some people to act without consequences while making others too afraid to speak out. Let's hear what the people think about power dynamics and sexual harassment.
I am a university student, and my context of sexual harassment could possibly be a lecturer. Maybe they have haughty eyes and they are looking at you in a way that is not proper, because obviously they are your lecturer and they are there to do your job. It could go as far as maybe you are struggling with your schoolwork and maybe you ask for help and they try to touch you in ways that are not proper.
Because people in these days take advantage of the powers that they have. Can I make a simple example of a lecturer? A lecturer can simply take advantage of the students just because they know that the students is vulnerable and their life depends on their marks and everything, and they tend to be making decisions where we find our students sexually harassed.
Sometimes it's really hard for people to really speak up against their superiors in fear of what they might lose, or maybe the work environment turning hostile, not necessarily being fired, but power dynamics most certainly.
Because sometimes people are scared to talk because they feel like they are being threatened, especially financially, because most of the time it's a matter of finances, I would say, yeah. Because imagine your boss is basically trying to get to sleep with you and he's being inappropriated and you can't really voice it.
Perfect example that's happening right now with a lady who was a secretary for a very prominent judge in the Eastern Cape and was throwing sexual advances at her unwanted, and now it's been turned into a huge issue.
Recently, there's been media attention on cases of sexual harassment, which highlighted people's lack of understanding of the topic, especially when power dynamics are involved. Nothemba, can a person truly give informed consent when there's significant power imbalances?
Thank you, Sepang. I-code of good practice, I recognize that the role power dynamics play with harassment cases. Ithatha into consideration intimidation as well. Benchilo qala mos ba harassment iba vertical iqala kumuntu who's in a position of power ibe kumuntu who has less bargaining power. Intimidation ne threats are used. Either you're threatened with dismissal, either you're intimidated, or sometimes umuntu athi ndizakupromota njengoba bendichilo qala okanye ndizakunyusela kwisikhundla esithile. So i-power dynamics play a big role with sexual harassment cases. And ke ngoku ndifuna sibe careful kwi-language esiyisebenzisayo because kwa i-language esiyisebenzisayo yile yenza abantu uba bangazi phambili bazoreport. Into zoba umuntu ebe-willing participant. Akho umuntu uyi-willing participant to rape, for instance. Akho umuntu uyi-willing participant to sexual harassment. La willing masimsuze because la willing akayiconsiderishi intimidation, akayiconsiderishi i-threats. So abanye abantu basifumanisa beku-position ba and i-language yale police mhlambi izawundenza ndingazi ngaphambili okanye ihlobo abantu abathetha ngalo emsebenzini izawundenza ndingakwazi uza phambili ndizoreport aba I've been sexually harassed by umphathi. For example, abanye boyika uba ndimrejectile umphathi uzondigxotha, uba ndimrejectile uzondiphatha kakubi emsebenzini. So ngene one ndivume le nto ayithethayo. So awunothi umuntu uyavuma okanye banesivumelwano kunantsike kwi-set enjalo okanye kwi-explanation enjalo.
So there is no willing participant.
No.
Her Majesty, we often hear of what we term rape culture, and one of the characteristics of that is victim blaming. What can you say about that? Can we really blame a victim? You hear things like she was wearing a miniskirt or he had lunch with her. What do you say about that?
Thank you so much, Sepang. I think just to echo on what Unotemba just said about the willingness, nakhona, it's very important for us to note, if we're going to define it and have victim blaming, what do we say then about amaswan that are raped? What do we say about the elderly who are raped? Because it's not about the attire, it's not about what they said or posed, but it's either they're very young or too old. So there is no such as good, a victim must be blamed. Why did they express themselves? Why did they even go there? Now, a human being is a human being. They expose themselves to things. We are curious individuals. Now, you cannot always just dismiss umuntu go say, why do you want to talk to me? So it's always important to go. Once a person lays their case, go, listen, I'm interested, can we do this? You as a person have a right. It's a constitutional right to say, no, I'm not comfortable, phone, and then that's what they can say. And then the perpetrator obviously will not take that. So we cannot blame a victim. It's his fault or her fault. To also note, we have to protect the definitions of blame. No, she was drunk or he was drunk. It means that we, as the people who are now doing the victim blaming, are at a place that we can also be perpetrators because we want to justify why this person now was, they committed something against them. So, we note there is no such there is no such. Unfortunately, it finds you. So myths will definitely also unpack those. Thank you.
Yes.
Uba umuntu uhlekile lo joke ubuyenza that has sexual connotations. No, then that doesn't mean it means like a mind. Code previous consent to sexual conduct does not negate sexual harassment. Yes. So even the hlekile joke yakho mhlawumbe uthetha into sexual, it doesn't mean low conduct is welcome. Okanye if undithumela message and I respond in a certain way, it doesn't negate sexual harassment.
Yes, thank you so much. Khonze, when we look at people with diverse sexual orientations and gender identities, we do know that they face a lot of discrimination and stigma. So I just want to know, in terms of their protections and mechanisms in place in institutions, are there any mechanisms in place to protect people with diverse sexual identities?
So, Tsepang, in the study that we did as the CGE, we uncovered something that nobody really wants to talk about because people are scared of positioning themselves directly when it comes to issues of members of the LGBTQI+. So people would say, no, in our policy, it speaks about same sex. Like I said, I used it because it's what we found in a lot of policies. No, we are same sex. Therefore, they are covered. And then you start unpacking with them. And they start realizing, oh, actually, same sex means something else. Because, like I said, a heterosexual man termed as a straight man or a straight woman can sexually harass another straight man, it's possible. So in many policies, they are not covered. And it's so unfortunate on the basis that they are the most vulnerable because not only are they harassed, but they're also harassed on whom they chose to identify as. So that is something that is extremely missing. So in a lot of institutions, you find that they've taken a standpoint and say, no, they act more like allies than defenders. So they would say we have a flag. That's the LGBTQI plus wall where everybody can go take pictures. Those are allies. But then in policy, you are no longer a defender. You're just an ally. You have a flag that is there, speaks to each of them. You have an event once in a while that speaks to members of the LGBTQI, but your policy does not translate to the flags that are there. So in most cases, they're not protected. And same thing applies to when you go outside because they're stigmatized. For example, you find cases where people would think because you are a lesbian couple, why do you think you can abort? There were questions asked. A person said, "But umshaya kanjani intombazana? We intombazana. Mshayana kanjani?" Because it's not a normal thing. It's not supposed to happen because nyamantombazana nina. There are no power dynamics. People don't want to recognize power dynamics even in LGBTQI plus relationships, which are mostly even rightfully highly when it comes to issues of harassment and GBV. Within that community.
Yes. Commissioner, I'm coming back to you. The role of culture in keeping people silent. How does culture play in that?
Culture plays a very key role, especially as part of the traditional leaders in our communities. It's very key for us to understand the definition of culture. It's a way in which we do things. We have been taught, it's been passed down from generation to generation, and there are certain expectations. So when it comes to these expectations we have, it's important for us to note ukuthi kuhlala kuba nalento ukuthi siyakhavana la. Ungaqala umane nje ukuthi uyohamba ukhuluma ngokuthi uzibani uyinde sona, depending also on their leadership roles in the family, in the institution itself, or even in the workplace. So there's always this need ukuthi nakumele ngimprotect lo muntu, otherwise where's ubuntu bami nakhona ngifuna ukuhlaza umuntu. And for us in the slangs, when it comes to hip hop, they say, what, snitches get stitches. So it's important for us to be able to break those cultures and unpack things and address matters as they are. If it's wrong, it is wrong.
So we do need traditional leaders to come and influence the space.
Definitely.
Khonzi, bystanders, what is their role? Do they enable or do they stop harassment?
Thank you for that question. And I think this is very critical because sexual harassment is firstly seen before it's felt and before it's seen before it's felt and before it's heard. So it's very important that a bystander, firstly, maybe we understand what a bystander is. Maybe you're sitting there, you do not understand what a bystander is. A watcher. When somebody does something, we're sitting in a room and and Her Majesty is watching it and it's okay. You are a bystander, and you play a great role. That's why I'm saying it's seen before it's felt, before it's heard, because you see the action first before it grows into something else. And you play an important role in being able to stop it. Also, bystander plays a major role in terms of prevention, because sometimes you find that in most cases that I've had to deal with, even when I was in leadership in university, you'd learn that the perpetrator is not even aware, but the bystander was aware. You could see that, because you are the bystander, you are able to see both people. I'm looking at Sepang and I'm looking at Notemba, and I see what Sepang is saying to Notemba is actually making Notemba uncomfortable. So that's when I come in and say, no, I think this is wrong. As a bystander, Sepang, are you looking at how Notemba receives that? So bystanders play a very important role in making sure that we play a very representative part. That's why if you're a bystander, I take you as a perpetrator too. If you sat there, watched it, looked at it, and want to speak about it when the deed has been done. Yeah, thank you so much.
Power and silence often go hand in hand, but institutions and individuals have the ability to change this. After the break, we explore what can be done to prevent sexual harassment before it even happens. Don't go away. Welcome back. You are watching Gender Space, brought to you by the Commission for Gender Equality. If you've just joined us, today we are discussing sexual harassment in institutions of higher learning, as well as in the workplace. Remember, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn as Commission for Gender Equality, on X at CGE_ZA, as well as on Instagram at CGE Live. Now, many people believe that when men are victims, their cases aren't taken seriously. Others argue that society holds double standards when it comes to how we perceive male and female perpetrators. Is this true? If yes, then how do we challenge these biases and ensure justice for all victims? Let's take a look at this clip.
I do think men also get harassed, but it's never taken seriously. Because I know a few people that got harassed before, you know, like we were in situations where they needed help and they can't get help because obviously, who are you going to report it to?
There's most definitely 150% double standards when it comes to sexual harassment amongst male and females.
I was in a similar situation. So after I told my friends that, like, I almost got sexual harassed, like, last night, they made it a joke, you understand?
I used to work by a restaurant whereby basically some customers will find you attractive, and men in particular. So they will come and touch you in ways that really makes you feel uncomfortable.
The focus currently in South Africa is around male to female abuse, but that isn't to say that there aren't any cases, or at least that we know about, of it being the other way around, where men are the ones being sexually harassed.
You know, we need to start teaching sexual harassment and consent at an early age. You know, not only when people are old, you know, we need to start educating the boy child and the girl child on certain things, on how not to act, how when you make someone feel uncomfortable, that is a form of sexual assault. Even passing a remark of just catcalling someone on the street, that, you know, that is a very uncomfortable thing for them.
Interesting views indeed. Commissioner, we do know that in society, when a woman reports a case of GBV or a harassment, there will be 5 vehicles going to pick up the perpetrator. But when a man reports, not even 1 vehicle will come. Why is that? Why are men not taken serious as victims?
Tepang, you know, unfortunately, they can handle it, they'll know how to deal with certain things. And I believe it comes back to even when we define what gender equality is and you're out with communities engaging, they're like, oh no, you mean you're here to represent women. So it's very important for us when we do unpack lama topic lawa, it's about you are human, we're here to represent you and protect you. So similar thing comes into play. So we notice that in society itself, there's this understanding or outlook to know when it comes to certain things, this part only, not when it comes to men. So it is definitely a reality. On paperwork, we want to make sure that it is actually an equal response for all. However, reality says no. Yes.
Thank you so much. Khonze, the role of toxic masculinity, how does it influence reporting? We know that society is struggling with toxic masculinity. Does that play a role in men reporting cases and society understanding that men can be victims?
Most definitely. There's a nice saying, meaning you can keep it, as a man, like what Commissioner said, you can keep it in, you can handle it. And the beast that is inside, you just keep it in and deal with it. And because men are, in most cases, perpetrators, it is then perpetuated that they cannot be victims. And you'd still find traits where, especially amongst men, I think even when we looked at, in fact, I don't think when we are having focus groups with the male groups in these institutions that we did the studies with, men would say that, you know, before a question passes around the room, the first thing that they do when one wants to speak of their experience is laugh. You know, they start laughing, it's impossible, and they start asking questions. But how is it, because you are strong, you're powerful, you're a man, how is it that you'd allow somebody else to do that to you, especially because the person would be somebody that is perceived to be weak? So how is it that, so it really does contribute towards that in terms of how they're treated and how serious the cases are taken. I mean, I've seen and experienced a lot of cases where you'd even walk in, for example, in terms of SAPs, where you see a lot of issues where you walked in and you have a case that you'd want to report. But the first thing that you see, it's already intimidation, or yo, ki simula kae go bua ka kgang e, ki simula kae go explainela another man, or yo, I've been spanked by somebody else, better yet, another woman, you know. Ki simula kae as a man. So the traits and the toxic masculinity are within you as a man and also around you from other toxic masculine men.
Yes. Notemba, when it comes to preventative measures and changing the culture, what are some of the effective ways to present sexual harassment in the workplace and institutions of higher learning?
Okay, Sebang, and njengoba benchilo, policies, they need to be updated. Policy ezininzi zindala. For example, ezinye policies zisathetha ngoba sexual harassment funeke i-report immediately, which is not the case. Ikhona case ebeyile labor law yayi overturn loo nto ka immediately. So it doesn't set a timeline, because siyafumanisa uba in most cases abantu bayoyika ukuza ngaphambili, so bangazi ngaphambili immediately. So institutions and workplaces need to make sure that their policies are updated. Secondly, policies, they need to be gender neutral. Policies should cover the LGBTQIA community as well. Gender specific language, because then gives the impression that for instance, so policies, they need to be gender neutral. And also policies must be clear regarding the complaints handling process. So those are some of the preventative measures that need to be taken into consideration for effective policies.
Yes, and the role of CGE. What is the role of CGE in terms of handling cases of sexual harassment? Can I go to the CGE and report a case of sexual harassment?
In the sexual harassment, it does fall within the mandate of CGE, but as is of first responders, for instance, like I said with the CCMA, umuntu report emsebenzini, yabo. Then if I go into emsebenzini, angaza kuti as a CGE. Kodwa xa imatter yomuntu isese CCMA, sexual harassment, akakwazi uphinda aze at the CGE as well, because the CGE ayizukwazi overturn a decision ye CCMA, yabo. Thina ke ngoku ku-CGE sizawu investigate siphande sijonge ezi policies zikhoyo kulo workplace or law institution, and then ke ngosenze report ngoku into esiyibonile nangento esiyiphandileyo whether i-employer ifailile na ukwenza ukuthile nokuthile nokuthile, and then okanye kukhona into esizibonileyo ezimayelana necase, and then senze i-report. Umuntu angayithatha ke ngoku lo report ayosupporta icase yakhe either at the CCMA or at the Labour Court, but asizo first responders thina as i-CGE.
And as we continue on that topic, how do institutions balance the right of both the accuser and the accused while ensuring that justice is served?
Okay. Into esiyifumanisileyo uba ii-institutions ziyafeyila kulo part. For instance, kule nto bendiyitsho uba ufumanisa uba uripotile i-complaint ye-sexual harassment, kodwa usafuneka uphinde uzophangela nalo mntu unantsikele ufale i-complaint against. So institutions in the workplace, they need to protect the respondent, they need to protect the complainant as well. In their processes, for instance, suspension, precautionary suspension, ayithi loo nto yagxothwa, ithi sizawuphanda, siyakususpenda but sizawuphanda. Then ke ngoku sizakwazisa ugqiba kwethu uphanda. That means ke ngoku ucomplainant uyakwazi uphinda aze emsebenzini, ne? Akwazi uphangela whilst kuqhutywa olu phando. So ii-policies funeka zibe victim central, yabo, because le nto yoba umntu angasusa emsebenzini, it affects nempangelo ka-complainant as well. So i-balance funeke i-found apho kuloba you are presumed innocent but siyaphanda. And ke ngoku kolu phando lwethu silenzayo funeke sikhusele nalo mntu ukhalazileyo.
Thank you. Commissioner, we've been speaking a lot about policies and lack of education around the policy. Do you think education on workplace ethics and consent should be a mandatory part of employee training? Why?
Tepang, it should definitely be mandatory because we live by the principle of if you do not know, but you perish. So education, information is very, very key. And if the information is not made available, or we assume, just because I put up that paper up there, just because I circulated an email, by understanding, it's not enough. We need those workshops. We need to make sure that they are set down with, they get to engage. My understanding is this. So it's very key that they do, and please, it's very key that we definitely have to encourage that. So mandatory all the way. Yes.
Baing Baka, Akili for the wonderful session that we had, and may you please continue educating our communities about the dangers of sexual harassment. Baburi Korae, ditaba ke tše dintši go fela nako. In this episode, we've explored the realities of sexual harassment in institutions of higher learning and the workplace, from understanding what constitutes sexual harassment to the legal frameworks that exist to protect victims. One thing is clear, sexual harassment affects everyone, and addressing it requires a shift in policies, attitudes, and accountability. If you or someone you know needs support, please reach out to the relevant reporting channels in your institution or workplace. The conversation does not stop here. Join us on social media to continue discussing how we can create safer environments for all. From all of us in the studio, until next time, stay informed and let's keep pushing for a society built on respect and accountability.